The battle for the best 3D fighter franchise was fought long ago on a battlefield that few experience today. In the arcades of yore, there were but two dimly lit yet striking names, opposing forces here at home and abroad. But only one would remain standing at the top of the 3D fighters pile. The grand battle that raged on between Sega and Namco was a sight to behold, and there were plenty of chances for either to take a decisive victory. Even though much of this back and forth has subsided, with Tekken becoming the de facto leader of the genre, Virtua Fighter could return, and with it, perhaps a new era for what is undoubtedly a niche genre. So join us in pondering the question of how Tekken became the flagship game of 3D fighters and the fierce competition that spawned it. Many decades ago, a rift between fighting games was beginning to emerge. With the rapid evolution of hardware and software, including the processing power of the chips inside arcades, there was a now difficult choice for developers coming into the early 90s to remain with 2D sprites and scenes, use the extra memory to increase the game's resolution and color depth, or venture beyond and lean on polygon renders, giving players a sense of depth unlike anything seen before. Although not the first, Tekken eventually became the leading candidate of not just a new way to display fighting games, but an entire genre of them: 3D fighters. A niche the series has dominated so well that over 3 decades since its first appearance, it is still unmatched by the competition. In today's video, we will dive deep into how Tekken became the omnipresent franchise that it is today, how it paved the way for 3D fighters, and more importantly, which, if any, 3D fighters could now or in the past had taken the crown away from Heihachi's head. Given that Tekken 8 is releasing soon, we also want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our Tekken 8 content, including guides by pro players to get you started on the right foot. You can also go to DashFight.com and keep up to date with all things FGC. In 1990, Sega's and Namco's competition in the 3D arcade games market began to heat up. Sega already had a strong arcade presence and a growing home console market share with the Sega Genesis. For their part, Namco was struggling to bring itself to global markets. An unreleased prototype 16-bit console and a fallout between them and Nintendo led them to wild ideas like a Namco-themed park that actually opened for a while. In 1993, Virtua Fighter was released, the start of the 3D fighter genre. It and its sequel a year later were some of the most technologically advanced arcade games of the time. Sega's push for 3D graphics was all-encompassing, from racing games to a die-hard tie-in to fighting games. They were on the bleeding edge of this technology. Their market share of the arcade business reflected that as well. For their part, Namco was seeing great success in the home console market. Its partnership with PlayStation put them in a platform that, over the course of its lifetime, would become the 6th best-selling console in the history of gaming. Which one was first? The PlayStation 2. In a way, Namco's failure to launch their own home console might have been a blessing in disguise. Sega, looking to carve itself a piece of the console pie and having some real success with the Genesis and Saturn, only released Virtua Fighter on its own consoles and Windows 97. I guess that's pretty neat. It wasn't until Virtua Fighter 4 that the series would reach PlayStation, but by then, Tekken had already cemented its place as the go-to 3D fighter, thanks to Tekken 3. With a number north of 8 million lifetime sales, not counting those from its re-release as part of Tekken 5, Tekken 3 was not just the most popular 3D fighter of its era, it was also running for best fighting game overall at the time. Coincidentally, it was also the first game of the series that legendary director Katsuhiro Harada would lead. By the third installment, the series' core gameplay had taken shape. The graphical fidelity of the Namco System 12 platform and the late PlayStation console had opened up the door to way smoother models and much more fluid motion. Another little feature in Tekken 3 that is making a comeback in Tekken 8 is Tekken Ball. The fun little minigame was obviously not the main reason for the game to reach the numbers of sales it did. The game's story mode and the Tekken Force mode all contributed to expanding the number of players who were happy to give this 3D fighting game a chance. Speaking of giving things a chance, DashFight has a Patreon. These lovely folks help us produce videos, articles, and fly to the major events in the fighting game calendar so we can keep you updated with all things FGC. If you want more DashFight, consider joining this lovely group of supporters. As the years went by, 3D models and rendering became the norm for the vast majority of games. Many used the opportunity to expand the playable area from 2D, like Super Mario 64 or Sonic Adventures. They brought a working formula of games and attempted to lift it into the next dimension. In fighting games, a similar phenomenon happened. When games like Mortal Kombat made the jump to 3D graphics, they did so with the idea of also opening up the stage for players to move around the screen a lot more. Going from digitizing the actors' performances to full handmade animations and the extra challenge of designing a 3D fighting game from the ground up was a lot for Ed Boon and the Midway team. So much so that the next decade of Mortal Kombat was attempt after attempt to develop a working basis for Mortal Kombat as a 3D fighter. That is not to say those games or the MK spin-offs of that era were bad games. It is just to say they were far from achieving the same level of success as Tekken for comparison. Although Midway Chicago still cranked out mainline MK titles with positive reviews, the wider company struggled to find its footing. Only once it was absorbed into the larger WB Media umbrella did they go back and restart the series once again as a 2D fighter, albeit with the now industry standard 3D models and graphics. Tekken had a decade of advantage over most 3D fighting game hopefuls. Dead or Alive and Virtua Fighter are two franchises that have often taken on the challenge of going up against Tekken right before and during the 2000s, but often came up short. Virtua Fighter 2 was a massive technical success and was critically acclaimed then. It managed to drive people to the arcades and enjoyed plenty of popularity in Sega's consoles. The next few Virtua Fighters also pushed the series' boundaries, with Virtua Fighter 4 becoming the best-selling game for Sega during the PlayStation 2 era. However, instead of continuing to build upon that success, Sega decided to instead focus on crossovers and new series. Virtua Fighter would go on for 5 years without a sequel, just updates and expansions, and today, it's been nearly 2 decades since the last main entry in the series. While Sega fumbled a key series trying to make this whole console business work, Namco picked up the slack and created its own small bit of competition in the form of the Soul Calibur series and the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series. Although neither would ever truly challenge Tekken for the title of most popular 3D fighter, they did have their own ideas and spins of the core concepts, such as Soul Calibur's weapon and character creation, or the Budokai Tenkaichi series' huge stage and aerial battles. By the time we got to the modern day in Tekken 7, 3D fighters were few and far between. Whether due to the technical challenges of creating an in-depth system that works with 3D space while still feeling like a fighting game, or the artistic struggles to make environments that can be seen from any angle and serve both gameplay and visuals, indie 3D fighters are exceedingly rare. Games like Skullgirls captured players' attention and sustained themselves in the highly competitive 2D anime genre, managing to follow up with an updated mobile version and a re-release in Second Encore, or Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, Rivals, and Multiverses, all of which are trying to upend the decade-long reign of Super Smash Bros. To peel back the curtains a little bit here, when we set out to make this video, we knew Bandai Namco had a vast library of games that could, in part, be described as 3D fighters. But in exploring the topic further, it has become exceedingly apparent that they not have only the biggest catalog, but potentially the only one. There are individual developers, but they publish their titles through Bandai Namco, like Spike Chunsoft, who are developing the new Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, or CyberConnect 2, who developed JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R. It's both endearing and also terrifying that a niche fighting game genre lives largely under one publisher's umbrella. What that says about how hard and potentially costly it is to develop a 3D fighter like Tekken is in this day and age is fairly clear. 3D fighters are incredibly challenging. Maybe it's just a matter of time. Virtua Fighter was a beloved game for those who had Sega console back in the day, and the wider 3D fighter community is certainly interested in seeing its return. Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, a remake of VF5, was very well received. The series also did a crossover DLC with Tekken and even made an appearance in Sega's Yakuza Like a Dragon. The publisher also hinted at looking through its console catalog for remakes and new entries alike at the Game Awards, though no Virtua Fighter 1 and 2 remake just yet. That is not to say that Bandai Namco and Harada have allowed the Tekken series to become stale. The new release is looking to shake things up somewhat with its new Heat system, but they have also brought back fan favorites like Tekken Ball. So, as you all gear up for the latest release of the Tekken franchise and ponder why there is only Tekken, it might be worth taking a step back and seeing the empire Bandai Namco has built over the years. Whether that's the cause for celebration or despair, well, we'll let you take that to the comments and let us know if you think Tekken's conquest of the 3D fighting game space is good or bad. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.